Hey everybody. Okay, so in today's video, we are just gonna get real. We have to accept the fact that reselling as a business, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, like you might come to expect if you watch reselling videos on YouTube. Now, it makes sense. When we're on YouTube and we wanna share the fun things that we find or the fun sales that we have, we tend to focus on the positive. We tend to focus on the great parts of reselling, of which there are so many. But we have to admit the fact that reselling is done by humans, both sides of it. As sellers, as buyers, we're all just people, right? And so there are going to be times where there's mistakes. Mistakes are going to be made. We might miscalculate our inventory. We might sell something on one platform and forget to remove it from another. People can change their mind. People can not understand how vintage sizing works, and so the clothes don't end up fitting. Items get damaged along the way. So all these things happen. And I just wanted to make a video about that real side of reselling, because especially if you're a new reseller, you just kind of need to be prepared that this is going to happen. Reselling can be a lot of fun. It also can be a lot of work, and it can have little problems and things that come up from time to time that are just kind of annoying, but we have to deal with them as part of business. So I'm just going to share my philosophy with you, my kind of method of handling some of these issues, and that hopefully helps you get a little bit more prepared if you're just starting on this reselling journey. It doesn't have to be drama-filled. I know I've been in Facebook reselling groups that I don't stay in, I must admit, just because the whole purpose of the group, people just tend to want to go and complain and vent, and I get it. But the purpose of the video, this video isn't to like complain about all my bad buyers or anything like that. It's just because that gets wearing. I don't know. I joined those Facebook groups and then you just hear about one problem after another. And it's like, if people just spent their energy a little bit more on just listing more items or going to find more items, I think they'd be happier. But anyway, I am digressing. So I'm not going to complain. What I wanted to do is just share. I kind of took a snapshot. I went through my last 90 days on eBay. I focused mostly on eBay. And I looked at all my unsuccessful transactions or issues or problems or things that had come up in the last 90 days. And I'm just going to share them really briefly with you and then just show kind of how I handled it. So do me a favor, go ahead, hit the like button if you've ever had an issue with a buyer, if you've ever had an unfair case opened against you or things like that. And then, just also hit the like button. Have you ever made a mistake in your reselling business? So I just want to show that it's like, it happens to all of us, okay? So looking at my numbers, in the last 90 days on eBay, I've had a total of 258 total transactions. Now, of those, I had 13 of them were issues, okay? They were unsuccessful. That's just eBay. We'll talk about Posh a little bit towards the end. But I was looking at that. 13 out of 258 is roughly 5%. So 5% of my transactions on eBay for the last 3 months were unsuccessful. And we'll see as we go in there. It's not like those were all returns. They were just transactions that did not go smoothly, right? Okay. So, and I don't know about you. Let me know in the comments down below. I tend, whenever I have an issue or I have a return, they come in batches. It's so weird. I don't know how to explain it, but it's just kind of like if you have one thing somebody's going to complain about or a return or whatever, I tend to have a bunch of them all at once, and then it quiets down for a really long time. So I don't understand it. So if you think 5%, that's kind of a high percentage to you, then I bet I could look back at a different 90 days, the 90 days before that, and my percentage would have been a lot less. There would have been a stretch where not much was happening, right? Okay, so nothing in those 13 issues were like crazy problematic or anything. They're just, you know, there can be issues, I agree, that can come up with people, you know, customers not being honest or, you know, just different things like that. But these were all just fairly minor things that had happened. Okay, so let's first talk about, let's talk about unpaid items. A lot of, not controversy, but with all the offers and sales that I do on eBay based on making an offer, accepting an offer, things like that, I actually have a really low amount of transactions that end up as unpaid items. So I'm happy for that. In those last 90 days, I only had two of those unpaid items. So the first one is this Tour de France hat. I sold it for $20 and the customer never paid for it. So eBay has an unpaid item policy, and that's 4 days. The buyer has 4 days to pay for their item. And then you can cancel the transaction as buyer didn't pay. Now, I always wait those full 4 days. Not a problem. I wait until that option shows up, buyer didn't pay, as my reason for canceling. And if you do that, if you wait those 4 days, then that goes on the buyer's record. You know, they kind of, I don't know if you call it a ding, but they get, it gets recorded against them that they didn't pay for what they ordered. And that option only shows up on day 4. Now, it doesn't show up in the morning of day 4. It shows up the exact like timing of when it's 4 days from the time it's sold. So if you're like, oh, it's been 4 days and you open it up and it's not there, you have to wait until it gets to be the time of day that they paid as well, if that makes sense. Okay, so we canceled it, relisted it, it's still for sale. Next up was this Bosch tool, one of my husband's tools. Same thing, buyer didn't pay, we sold it. I think we took an offer for $120. When I just say the controversy earlier, all I meant was that eBay has been promising that they'll add like an immediate payment option to offers. Right now, you can check off immediate pay required for your full price, you know, listings. But as soon as offers are involved in it, the back and forth, eBay has slowly been rolling out that option where the person will have to put in a credit card before they make the offer. And so if you accept the offer, it will pay right away. They've been talking about rolling it out. They've been rolling it out slowly for like over a year now or something like that. So who knows if that will ever come to be. So this one was an offer, $120, and they never paid. And so we canceled it on the 4th day, relisted it, and resold it for $150. So that all worked out. Someone else bought it at our full asking price. Okay, so the next little category were when people ordered things. I had 2 times people ordered something and then asked to cancel. So they didn't pay, I didn't have to refund, but they realized right away that they didn't want it. So this first one was the Portland Blazers hat. My hat I was so excited about. So funny. Speaking of reselling mistakes. No, it's not really a mistake. It's just me probably getting too excited over something that not as many other people are excited about. And so my little gut didn't work out quite right on that one. But anyway, this person bought the Portland Blazers hat, but then right away sent me a message saying they were actually trying to buy a Carhartt shirt. Well, it wasn't my Carhartt shirt. I think what happened was they had it, like both things in their shopping cart, and they were buying the one, and maybe eBay just said, okay, you can go ahead, not combined it, but you know how you can pay for all your items from all the different sellers all at once. So they might have been not quite ready to buy that, or someone else put it in the shopping cart in their family or something like that. So they went ahead and said, oh, that's not what I meant to buy. So I just went ahead and go ahead and canceled the transaction from their side. And you can just choose buyer and seller agree to cancel the transaction, or I sent the cancellation request, then they have to accept it. Okay, so they did that. The second one, I think I mentioned in my last What Sold video, I was showing this Minecraft storage box, and then I realized it was a canceled order, so it wasn't really a sold item. So they reread the details right after they bought it, and then realized it wasn't going to work for what they wanted, and so they asked to cancel that, so we went ahead and did that. Okay, so moving on to returns, let me go ahead and just explain my return policy and what I've done to kind of make things no drama mama. Make things simple. I have my returns set up to be auto accepted. So if someone opens a return, it automatically says, yes, it's okay, you can return this item. I do not do free returns. So I do not pay for the items to come back to me unless it's an item not as described, and like an INAD, okay? So with that policy, I have a little bit of leeway about the percentage I give back for in certain situations, and whether or not I'm going to reimburse them their original shipping or not. So most of my returns come back because if someone changed their mind, the item didn't fit, or they just didn't like it. And I can choose whether to return the original shipping to them or not, the shipping they paid for the item to get to them. In an item not as described, you have no choice. You're reimbursing them and making them whole completely. You're paying for them to return it, and basically, yeah, they are out no money by the end of the whole transaction if it's an item not as described. But if they just didn't like it, or if it didn't fit, they have to pay to send it back to me. So that's how I have it set up. So I'm pretty, easygoing and laid back on a lot of things. So my return policy is very kind of in the middle. It's not a complete, sure, I'll pay for everything to come back to me or anything. But I'm not gonna not accept returns and make people fight for every return that happens. Okay. So I fall kind of somewhere in the middle. So one of the first returns I had recently were this pair of safety glasses. They're all safe safety glasses. They were sunglasses, and we sold them for $50. Now that might seem kind of high, but they are within comps. Vintage safety glasses can do really, really well. There was another comp for that same brand that was like $45. And again, we always have our pricing a little bit higher to have wiggle room for making offers. So the person just bought him full price, and they got him, and they were not happy. They did not feel they were worth $50. And our glasses the picture just shows them loose, but they were in their original package. They were new and not used. So that's their opinion, right? They felt like there was a $5 pair of safety glasses that we were selling for $50. And, that's their opinion. They're entitled to that. No biggie. But it was not a matter of item not as described, because everything, they didn't open the return that way. They just didn't like it. So they did have to pay for the sunglasses to come back to us. And they had to pay, I didn't pay the original shipping back to them either. So we got them back. It was actually funny because the buyer was like in the next town over. And so it all happened really fast, but we got them back, we checked them, double checked the condition, and we just went ahead and refunded and then relisted them. All easy peasy and done, and I don't have to think about it anymore. Now, this next one is a little bit trickier. These were blades, head and blades to a Remington shaver. When I sold them, they were new, and we got a return request for them to, you know, that they wanted to send it back, and they said it didn't fit. It didn't fit their razor. Okay, we had all the information on there about which models it fit and everything like that. So I thought about it and I said, you know what? It's going to be open when it comes back to me. So it's not going to be used, but it's going to be open. So that'll be interesting. I did feel like it was still worth them sending it back to me. So I just let the transaction, the return happen. They sent it back. We got it. Sure enough, it was open. It wasn't open. It wasn't like ripped open. It was just kind of neatly opened on the side. And so what I did in that situation, and this is kind of interesting because I've never done it. I've never had to do this before. So I didn't do, I didn't reimburse their shipping. They paid to ship it back because it was like a didn't fit, not an item not as described. But then eBay lets you in the return, you can say that the item is not in the same condition that you sent it, and you can take off a percentage of the return. You can just decide how much of it you're going to refund back to them. I think you might have a limit like 50% or something like that. Anyway, I did like 10% or whatever, just because it's still sellable. It's still kind of new, but I can't sell it as a brand new sealed item anymore. Now, it's interesting when you do that is it like flagged the buyer. So as soon as I did that and then issued the rest of the refund, it sent me an email that said, "Oh, thank you for reporting this buyer." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't like mean to report them. So it triggers, when you do that, it triggers like a report against this buyer." So I was like, I kind of felt bad about that. But it is what it is. And then it's kind of, this return hasn't closed out yet because even though I sent the return and it was done all legally the way eBay said, it hasn't closed out because the buyer has to accept or let them know that they received the refund, and the buyer hasn't done that yet. So I don't know how long it'll sit there. And, if it goes a little much longer, I'll just message eBay for Business on Facebook and kind of ask them like, how long do I have to wait for this? Is this like 30 days or something like that? So we'll see. I mean, it's not affecting me at all that I know of. So I'm just kind of ignoring it. It's just every once in a while I see the little, open return number and I'm like, what is that? Okay, next up we had a broken item. This doesn't happen to us very often. This was this 80s pea soup, Anderson's restaurant pea soup mug. She sent me this picture, and unfortunately she also claimed that it was not packaged well and that she wanted her money back. So, I mean, I know, Mr. Pish Posh, he can package anything and packages like better than anybody. And so I knew the packaging wasn't the issue. Now, I could have handled this a little bit differently. I went ahead, she sent me just a picture of the mug with the handle broken. Okay, so it could have been that as she opened it, she dropped it and it broke, right? It could have arrived broken, but she did not send me any pictures of like the packaging which a lot of times, you know, you get a package in the mail and one side of it is crushed in and you're like, oh great, what's going to happen inside? But if she didn't have any concerns with the outside of the package and didn't mention it at all, it just kind of makes me wonder. But I just decided, you know, it was $15. The mug sold for $15. And so I could have tried to get pictures of the packaging. I could have had her go to the post office to make so I could make the claim for breakage and get some money back with the insurance. Lots of different things I could have done. I just was kind of curious, so I just went ahead and refunded the $15 because in the end, my time is worth money. Okay, so I for a $15 item, it wasn't worth it. But I did ask her for pictures of the box and of the packaging, and I never heard from her again. Because of course not. Why would she bother to do that? Because I already gave her money back, right? So yeah, I could have handled it differently. I could have maybe been a little more hardcore. I don't know. It wasn't worth it for that value of an item. And, you know, it was just kind of one of the ones I was like, I wonder what really happened in that situation. Okay, the next one, I'll try to go through these a little faster, but the next one was kind of interesting. It was this Bucilla kit. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce that. But it was a pretty good sale, and I'm sure I showed it to you in my what sold video. But they opened a return, said, oh, I just don't like it when you do this, and the threads are going to be really thick, and da 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 da. And you know, my returns are automatically approved, so I was waiting for it to come back, and the very next day I looked at eBay and the buyer had closed the return. So they were going to send it back, changed their mind. Maybe they found out that they would have to pay to send it back and decided to keep it. I don't know what happened. But then they left positive feedback and loved the kit. So I really don't know. But anyway, so that one, you know, if I said there were 13 issues, that actually ended up being a non-issue. It just was, you know, another day where you get the email saying, hey, so-and-so opened a return. And you're like, no. But it all was for nothing. Here was another funny one. Okay, so you remember my crazy dolls. My little Miss No Name creepy dolls. We were so glad to get out of the house, right? This one sold for $120. Now, one day a box shows up on my porch and she has come back. And this was, I think, the lower value one. Yeah, I think so. It was the one with the blue dress, right? Okay, so she's back at my house again. And, you know, it wasn't like it was failed to deliver and just got returned. The buyer she hand wrote out my address and like stuck it on the box. Okay, so doll buyers, sometimes we're dealing with elderly people. She didn't quite, I guess, understand the whole return process on eBay, and she ended up just sending it directly back to me. But there was no note, there was no explanation, there was no contact. Okay, so theoretically, I could have just taken it back and resold it and not given her my money because she didn't given her her money because she, you know, didn't do it the right way. She didn't go through eBay's process. Now, I still have to live with my conscience, right? So I just went ahead, I issued the refund, obviously not the shipping and all that kind of stuff, because I figured I could relist it. And doing this video, I was like, oh snap, I never relisted it. I just saw it the other day in the garage and I was like, oh, that's right, we got to get that out of here again. Okay, so that's another situation that might come up. That's up to you and what you feel like you need to do. I think I've had that happen a handful of times over the years on Etsy. Yeah, not quite with that high of a value of item. Like, I really don't know what people are thinking sometimes. Here's another one I could have handled better. It was such a small value. I'm kind of kicking myself. It's this Sanrio stationery. I ended up selling it for $10. The item got delayed in the mail. So it was about 3 weeks or so had gone by, and I got a message or a case open from the buyer that they hadn't received their item. So like I always do, I look at tracking, and tracking said basically that it was stuck and it would be arriving later than usual, but it was in one spot and was going to move on to its next destination. So I uploaded the tracking and said, hey, tracking looks like it's just going to be late if you can hang in there. Well, with this kind of case, you do have to, there was probably something in there that had more of a time limit, and I just kind of ignored it. So I did that, and then I just kind of let it go. I went over to USPS and I signed up for text updates on the package. And a few days later, I got a notice from eBay that the buyer had escalated the case and asked eBay to step in. And they stepped in and said, yeah, the package is late, the buyer is right, and you need to refund her. And so they took my money and refunded her. Now, I was looking the other day at my metrics, and that actually counted against me because eBay had to resolve a buyer issue. They had to step in and do something. So you got to kind of pay attention to time limits and time things when those come up. I just thought, a lot of times when you do a USPS text update type of thing, sometimes that shakes the package loose a little bit. So I kind of just said, hey, tracking says it's still coming. But what I probably should have done within the next day or two, I wasn't getting any kind of response back from USPS. I should have gone back in there. It was $10. I should have just refunded her. And I never got any text updates on it. So it probably is a package that's totally lost. And yes, it is possible that you can do that, and then the item will show up and the buyer gets their money and the item. So that just happens sometimes, right? Sometimes you have a nice buyer who says, hey, I got it after all, and can I pay you back, right? Sometimes that happens. Okay, next one, very simple. This Revital, I think I talked about it in a What Sold. It sold for $20. I got a message from the buyer that it was no good. It was sealed and everything, but they said it had gone bad. Health and beauty discontinued, things like that can happen. I had 2 of them. One of them sold no issues, and the second one had an issue. So for whatever reason. And then I think I've talked about this one recently too, is this Cabela's hat, this bright orange, blaze orange. The buyer just didn't like it, so that got returned to us, and we refunded and relisted. So yeah, the only issues, I was looking over at Poshmark, and most of the issues there, I will straight out say it, are totally my fault. So they are inventory issues where I'm cross-posting and it gets sold on eBay and I didn't remove it from Posh. So that seems to happen to me a lot. If the busier I am with non-reselling activities, when I've got time to work on reselling, I'm in Poshmark, I'm on eBay, I'm kind of seeing all my inventory all the time. And I kind of have that mental like, oh, wait a minute, I remember shipping that, like that shouldn't be on there, right? My software does have, I use VENDOO, and it's just a little different situation that we have, most likely because my husband works on eBay and I work on eBay and Poshmark. And so sometimes he says, you know what, I'm going to go in. He might end a bunch of listings and tweak them and all that. So now the new listing location is different than the one that I have in VENDOO. So they're not quite connected. The VENDOO and Poshmark listings aren't connected anymore unless I go in and update all the VENDOO. And sometimes I get to a point where I'm like, that's just too much busy work. I'm not going to do that. So all that is my fault, okay? And not keeping up with inventory is totally my fault. So the cancellations I've had to do on Poshmark have all been that kind of thing, my problem. There was one situation on Posh where some flatware, some Henkel's flatware did not get, or it showed as delivered. The buyer said they didn't get it. Poshmark refunded them, but they let me keep my money as well. But that's the main things on Poshmark. And I don't know that Etsy has been, you know, I didn't go deep into like some of the other platforms for this video, because we're already at about 30 minutes here. But I do remember a couple sewing patterns that were my fault. I listed them as uncut from my quick check of them. They looked factory folded and everything like that, but it was probably just a seamstress who folded very, very neatly and got things back. And it turned out there was like a piece missing or a little section of pieces missing. In one case, I had the same pattern and I was able to ship out a new one to them. Other case, I just had to refund and apologize. So, I had one other story. I thought maybe we could look also at my feedback, because I think that's some of the feedback you get is just kind of funny. But I wanted to tell you about the almost negative I got. I had one more issue that had come up on eBay, but it wasn't through a return or a case. It was just a message that I got. So a few weeks ago, all of a sudden I get this message from a buyer who had bought Danskos, the shoes, like 6 weeks earlier or something like that. And I'll show you the message here. So basically she comes on and she, you know, says that she was about to leave she's been meaning to leave me a negative. But eBay, and this is kind of nice, eBay encourages people to contact the seller before they leave the negative feedback. So they're like, did you contact the seller? So she's like, eBay said I should contact you first before I leave the negative. So now I'm going to tell you how disappointed I was that these Danskos fell apart like an hour after I started wearing them. And then, you know, she kind of tells the story. And as soon as I saw it was Danskos, like I knew. Danskos have a reputation for dry rot in their soles. And I feel like I've come across it recently a little bit more often, just because I think people like a lot of shoes, like during the pandemic, like I know myself, I just had some shoes in storage. Like we moved and I had shoes I didn't even unpack because we weren't doing like our normal activities. And I was home a lot more, not wearing shoes. So if you're not storing your shoes in a great condition or place, Danskos are especially known for dry rot in their soles. So I'd had it happen before. People had messaged and said their shoe like disintegrated while they were walking, and I feel terrible. And you're supposed to, when you get Danskos, like try to twist them and, you know, but I really think you can't really fully test them unless you're putting, like if you're wearing them and putting that weight on them. That seems to be when the problem happens. I've kind of backed off selling Danskos for that reason, and they don't really get the prices that they used to anyway. So I just immediately answered and told her I totally believed her. I understood what was going on. I was glad she reached out to me. And honestly, she should have reached out to me as soon as it happened. I refunded her. And then I told her I was refunding her and everything. So, you know, she calmed down after that and wrote back and said she'd never had that happen before, hadn't heard of it. You know, I had told her she could look it up, you know, that it's kind of a thing. Anywho, so I avoided the negative on that one. And there was no case, there was no anything, but I just went ahead and refunded her for those shoes. Obviously, I was not requiring her to send those back. But let's pop over real quick and look at the feedback. I did get a neutral feedback recently, and I just want to show you why. Okay, so here we are on my Facebook page, as you can see, Pish Posh Shop 75. Anyway, so I have 2 neutrals in the last 12 months and 1 negative. So the neutral, this cracks me up. This is that recent one in the last month. If you remember from my what sold videos, it was this Old Navy, it was a Mackinac Trapper style hat. And I remember being so impressed with the fact that an Old Navy hat sold for $35, but it was in really good condition. It was really nice, right? And this is the neutral feedback I get. That makes me laugh. So anyway, I guess they weren't impressed, but not enough to send it back, not enough to, you know, whatever. And actually, I shouldn't be showing the the buyer there. But anyway, that's what he said. So that I, you know, there's no reply to that. I am not even worried about it. It got buried so quick with positive feedback that it was all good. And then if you want to see the other, let's see. The mug does not look as good in person as it does in the photo. It's always the really cheap mugs and cheap items that I end up having that type of reaction to. And then negative, my negative was a buyer who he was not happy with the fact that he had to pay to ship it back because it came back due to fit. And he thought he should also, I think it was more that he thought he should get his original shipping back. But I explained to him that I didn't keep that shipping, that I gave that shipping cost to the post office. And so that money is gone, right? And there was nothing wrong with the coat. It just, the measurements didn't, maybe he didn't check the measurements. I don't know. But anyway, those are the interesting feedback that I've got. Not too terrible in the last 12 months, but it puts me at 99.6%. Okay, so that's the deal. Problems happen in the reselling world. Not everything goes super smoothly. I am well aware of the fact that the problems I shared with you could have been much more dramatic and much more, you know, unpleasant, but I don't know. I just kind of find those to be very few and far between. So if we think about the fact 95% of my sales on eBay were totally fine. And every once in a while, I even get a message from a buyer after they receive the item, and you know, you tend to go, oh no, what's the matter? And then they send me how happy they are, and they show me a picture of the item that they bought, you know. Anyway, so the good, definitely for us, the good always outweighs the bad. And so like I said, I didn't want this to be a negative video, but just a realistic video, and to see the full aspect, all the sides of reselling. So like I said earlier, go ahead, leave me a thumbs up if you've ever had an issue, a problem before, if any of this information was helpful for you. And then also leave me a comment or a thumbs up if you liked my thumbnail for this video. My youngest son made that one for me, and so I think he did a really good job. And like I said in one of my last videos, I am away next week. Hopefully I will have a video, at least one video out for you next week that can that will air while I'm gone. So I hope you guys have a good weekend, and we will talk to you later.